A girl was floating in the air above the entrance to a large gray temple. Her hair was lavender in color, and on her head was an ornament resembling a tiara with a stud decorated with stones. On her forehead was a diamond-shaped crystal of a sky blue color. She was dressed in a white dress with a rather deep neckline and a blue cape. In the girl's hands was a scroll. Looking at the crowd of young girls and boys gathered near the temple, she said that a 19-year-old student who had not reached the 6th level of Kai study would be expelled from school. The students whose names will be read out will be able to go about their business in peace. The girl began to read out numerous names aloud, while the long-haired, brown-haired Gu Shaoyang stood in the crowd and was very worried. He had been practicing Kai for more than 6 years, but was only able to reach the 5th level. He lacked quite a bit to stay in the sect of immortals. When the guy realized that his name was not pronounced, he swore obscenely and fell to the ground, losing consciousness. The guy abruptly jumped up on the bed with a scream, deciding that he had a terrible dream. The girl who was reading the names came up to Gu. The guy was very surprised by Zia's presence. Aloud, he noted that there were many bubbles of different colors flying around the girl, and asked her about their origin. However, the girl replied that she did not understand what he was talking about and said that Shaoyang had not reached the 6th Kai level within the prescribed number of years and therefore would be expelled from school. Zia noted that the 5th level of Kai will be enough to ensure the safety of yourself and your loved ones for the rest of your life. Gu seemed to ignore what the girl said and again informed her that strange multicolored bubbles were flying around her. Zia was enraged by Gu's reaction and told him that he had been unconscious for half an hour. Leaving the room, she began to talk about the fact that there are many people who cannot enter the immortal door, but the young man stopped her. The girl turned back towards the guy, expecting to see him on the bed, but he suddenly appeared a centimeter from her face. Shaoyang was standing very close to Zia and again talking about some strange bubbles. He reached out with his hand to touch one of them. Zia was very indignant and confused at the same time, so much so that she could not move and only cursed, while the young man continued to reach for the bubble. At that moment, when the young man touched the blue ball, it hurt him and he felt as if some kind of force possessed him. Zia was extremely outraged by Gu's behavior and hit him in the face with all her might so that he flew into the wall. At that moment, another young man entered the room, happy at the news that Shaoyang had woken up, but his smile was quickly replaced by surprise at what he saw. Zia approached the guy and with anger in her voice ordered to make sure that Gu left the room. Shaoyang was kneeling on the floor at the same time and expressed concern that he thought his ribs were broken. The guy squatted down and with a laugh began to tell Gu that he saw him trying to touch Zia. According to the guy, Shaoyang is going to leave school, but still dares to touch the hands of the first beauty of the sect, the most beautiful Zia Kinkyu. Gu didn't pay attention to the words of the guy standing in front of him and imitating Zia's expression, as all his thoughts were focused on the bubbles flying around the guy. They were slightly different from the ones that Kinkyu had, but in general, they were similar. The guy asked Gu if he knew that Zia, as an inner disciple who came to the test, ranks first in physical skills. At that moment, Gu stood up and began to approach the guy closer and closer to touch the bubble flying around him. The guy was embarrassed by Gu's behavior and asked him what he was doing, to which Gu replied that everything was really not as it seemed to him. The guy did not believe him and ran out of the building shouting that Shaoyang was a pervert, while Gu shouted after him that he had misunderstood everything. Gu stood in the doorway and thought that everything that was happening was one big misunderstanding, when suddenly he noticed a lot of bubbles flying inside the building, on which there were inscriptions such as life force, attribute of a tree. The guy walked and touched the bubbles with his finger to burst them. He realized that when he punctured the bubbles, his body absorbed everything written on them. The guy was very happy with this outcome of affairs and wondered if he could become the greatest with such powers. Shaoyang was sitting on the floor of his room looking at the blue glowing stone in his hand. He reasoned that it seemed to him that the life force from the bubbles is an attribute that increases the ability to cultivate. Even that low-grade primeval stone that the guy was considering added as much as 97 units of vitality. After absorbing the stone, the original property of the bubble disappears and turns into a countdown. The guy could not understand why he suddenly began to see these bubbles, but since God gave him this opportunity, he decided to use it for his own good. The next day, two guys walking around the square were discussing Gu Shaoyang. One of them could not believe that Shaoyang was a pervert, while the other was glad that Gu had failed the test and would soon be expelled from the sect. Suddenly, the guy heard Shaoyang's voice behind him, calling him by the name of Zhang Hai. Zhang turned around, saw Shaoyang, and immediately ran away from him screaming. Zhang begged Gu to let him go, But Shaoyang only grinned angrily and said that he could not let him go because the guy had what he needed, bubbles. Zhang Hai was running away from Gu Shaoyang and begged him to stop chasing him, to which Shaoyang replied that if Zhang stopped running away, Gu would stop running after him. Shaoyang thought that only by absorbing more tree attribute points as soon as possible would he be able to revive his talent. Otherwise, even if there is more life force, absorbing it would be a waste of time. If Gu leaves the sect, then in the future he may not have the opportunity to absorb attribute points. Suddenly Shaoyang stopped abruptly as he saw a young man near whom a new bubble was flying, previously unknown to him. Gu was so surprised that he stopped chasing Zhang. The young man greeted Shaoyang and smiled benevolently at him. Shaoyang laughed and looked at the guy with a sly squint. The young man was very frightened by the look, and he followed Zhang's example and began to run away from Gu, shouting. Shaoyang started chasing after the two guys and ordered them to stop running away from him, while Zhang, who called the second youth by the name of Wu, asked him about how he ended up in this position. Watching all this from the side, the crowd of students stood in horror and asked someone to stop this outrage. Shaoyang continued to chase after the guys. He called them bastards and asked them to give him some more suck urgently. The guy understood that if he did not absorb their attributes, he would be kicked out of the sect on the same day. Wu and Zhang, who did not know about the existence of bubbles around them, had no idea what Shaoyang meant when he asked them to give a suck. But the version that Gu was a pervert was even stronger in their heads. Suddenly, Zhang stopped and stretched his arm to the left, thereby stopping Wu, who crashed into her and cursed obscenely in pain and surprise. Zhang was surprised out loud that he and Wu were running away from Shaoyang and urged them to stop playing catch-up, because they already have the 6th level of Kai, and Gu has only the 5th, and they can easily defeat him, since they have nothing to fear. Gu, who heard this, stopped abruptly and asked his comrades about why they were running away from him, because he does not eat people. At this time, Wu whispered in Zhang's ear that he had heard that people possessed by a female ghost could suck male yang energy. He also suggested that Gu Shaoyang woke up from a faint quite recently, and it is quite possible that he is possessed and for this reason wanted to inhale the energy of men. After listening to guesses from Wu, Zhang, saying that only his fist could solve everything, began to warm up before the fight. Shaoyang noticed this and thought that he was lucky that Zhang wanted to fight, because now he wouldn't have to worry about how to take the bubbles from him. He said out loud that he was ready to fight and asked about which of the guys would be the first. Zhang replied that no one would want to fight Shaoyang one-on-one and called on all the students to pile on this pervert together. Shaoyang just smiled and said that he was more than satisfied with this arrangement. The guy thought that before he was worried about how he could get close to such a large number of people, but now he would concentrate only on collecting bubbles and not fight head-on. At that moment, while Shaoyang was thinking about it, Zhang was the first to punch him in the face and asked the guy what he was thinking about and noted that he laughed like a girl. Shaoyang got angry, cursed and said that he had not yet expressed his readiness for battle, and thought to himself that he was lucky to have managed to capture Zhang's attribute. Otherwise this injury would have been in vain. Suddenly, a large number of students at once piled on Shaoyang from all sides, simultaneously shouting unflattering things at him. While everyone was beating Shaoyang, he only concentrated on taking the attributes and mentally thought that in the future he would take revenge on them all. However, after gaining a large number of bubbles, the guy realized that his cultivation could not withstand such a number of attribute points. Suddenly, Zia appeared on the street and looked at everyone present with surprise. She asked the students about what they were doing and why they were crowded there. Suddenly, she felt someone grab her shin. The girl looked down and saw Shaoyang there. He was lying on the ground all beaten up and begged Zia to save him. In his hands he held several attributes of different colors. The girl looked at Gu in surprise, and then angrily kicked him so hard that he flew several meters away, and dropped one of the attributes. Shaoyang thought to himself that this blow was mean and he must have hit the girl hard earlier. After all, the girl was the first genius of the inner sect and was responsible for overseeing the outer sect. The guy counted all his attributes and realized that he still lacks them. Zia approached Gu and pointed her sword at him, calling him a bastard, recalling her words that anyone who has not reached the 6th level of Kai can leave the outer sect. In response, Shaoyang quietly said that he was already at the 6th level of Kai imprisonment. In response, the girl said that she is the main disciple of the Green Cloud sect and perfectly sees his level of cultivation. Zia said that at the moment Gu barely reached the 5th level of Kai, and although this is already more than he had at the time of the announcement of the list, the 5th level is the 5th level. She ordered the guy to get out of the sect and mentioned that she would not blame him for what he had done earlier. But if Gu continues to lie and cheat, the girl will destroy his weak cultivation without regret. The other students who were watching Zia and Gu's conversation felt a little sorry for Shaoyang. Zhang said that he was well aware of Shaoyang's strong desire to stay in the sect, but to reach the 6th Kai level before the age of 18 is very important. This rule is necessary before checking whether the student will be able to raise his level in the future. Besides, everyone who wanted to join the sect had to have a level not lower than the 3rd. In response to this, Gu shouted again that he already had the 6th level. Zia looked at Shaoyang with annoyance, but did not have time to say anything, because the guy said that if the girl did not believe him, she could check for herself. The girl called the guy stubborn and reminded him that if he still has not reached the 6th level and continues to lie to her, then she will destroy him. Shaoyang asked what would happen if it turned out that he still achieved the 6th level of Kai. Zia replied that in that case, he would get whatever he wanted. Zia Kinkyu swore that she would not go back on her word. The students who were watching Zia and Gu whispered to each other and called the guy a loony because he was seriously going to run into Big Sister Zia. Sister Zia is the first genius in the clan with great talent, and her cultivation has already reached the peak of the Yuan realm. She has only one step left to reach the next realm. In turn, Shaoyang is a disciple of the outer sect, who has already been expelled. The students did not understand how he found the courage to offer a duel to this girl. Hearing these words, the young man was surprised, because he did not offer a duel and thinks that he will pass the test to reach the 6th level of Kai. This meant that he just needed to hold on to the 6th level for as long as possible. The guy examined Zia's bubbles and noticed that she has diligence, vitality, and sword intent. From his experience, the guy decided that vitality is the most important of all attributes. This attribute directly affects the cultivation ability. There is also a root bone that can improve the efficiency of the vital energy that Gu has already absorbed. But the effect of the attribute with the name Sword Intent by Doi Shaoyang remained a mystery. Su ordered the guy to attack her to see his strength, but he refused because he heard that the girl had already reached the peak of the Yuan sphere. Su is 2 spheres higher than Shaoyang, which means that the girl will be able to defeat him with one left hand. The guy mentioned that in this situation it would be difficult for him to show his real strength. The girl replied that she would be able to see the level of Gu only after he made a lunge. Since this is a level test, not a duel, the girl will not take the initiative, and Shaoyang can safely attack her. The girl answered exactly as the guy needed, and he thought about it quite to himself. Gu lunged at the girl with the intention of taking her life force, but Zia dodged very quickly and flexibly, and the guy managed to grab only the bubble with the sword intent. The guy tried to grab the attribute he needed again. Then Zia turned out to be very flexible, and was able to dodge again. The girl pointed the sword at Gu and summarized that he was too poorly prepared and did not pull even to the 5th level. At this time, the guy touched the bubble with the sword intent, and a blue sword aura appeared around him. Zia was offended by the fact that Shaoyang was distracted during the fight and she gave him a savory slap in the face. The guy flew off a few meters along the way shouting obscenities. Zia told Gu that it would be better for him to just give up, turned around and was about to leave, when suddenly Shaoyang stopped her with a shout. The girl looked questioningly at Shaoyang and then he asked her if he should make his move now. The guy quickly ran towards the girl, simultaneously taking the sword from one of the students. Gu sliced through the air with his sword and left a blue trail. Everyone was surprised to see that his sword had an aura. While Sister Zia stood in amazement, Gu took another attribute from her and thanked her for the opportunity to take the test. The guy once again thought about how lucky he was that only he could see the bubbles. The guy could not even think that the sword intent would help him reach the 6th level, and the life force of the best expert of the inner sect would be a gift in honor of overcoming the 6th rank. The girl emotionally began to ask the guy about where he got the aura of the sword. In her opinion, it was impossible, because only people who have been practicing fencing for many years are able to master the aura of the sword, and she did not understand. How could an outer sect disciple create such a thing? In response, the guy just laughed it off and reminded her that the girl promised to do anything if Shaoyang won. Gu joked that he would like to take her place, and now that he had passed the test, the young man could ask for anything. The girl hoped out loud that the guy would have at least a drop of conscience when he took the inner sect test. Gu said that he was joking about the promise given to him by the girl, and in fact grandfather was just afraid that he would be kicked out of the sect, and therefore tripled the competition with Zia. To this, the girl replied that when the guy was released, he would need to go to the inner door and say that he was going to meet her. All the students were very surprised by this answer. Even Shaoyang did not expect such a reaction from Zia, and he felt embarrassed. The guy decided that first he should go to the pavilion of Tibetan scriptures. Gu walked out of the Tibetan scriptures pavilion, holding a scroll in his hands. He thought about how it was a pity that the disciples of the outer sect could only pass to the first level, but the lone assassin sword technique that the guy bought was considered the best. Rumor has it that good practice can even control the energy of the earth. Most of the attributes of the outer sect disciples were absorbed by Shaoyang, as a result of which the essence stone disappeared. In fact, the life force of these items is even more pathetic. In any case, the test of promotion to the courtyard, which will be in half a year, Gu cannot miss in any case. He can only go there to test himself. A few days later, in the Killian Mountains, Gu was testing his guess that monsters also have attributes. His guess turned out to be correct when he met a bear with the attributes rage, protection, and strength. However, the guy did not expect that he would meet a second-rank beast at the very beginning of the mountain. The first and second ranks of monsters on the Tianyuan continent are equal to the Kai imprisonment area, and the third and fourth ranks are equivalent to the Jiayuan area. The fifth and sixth ranks are the Condensed Truth realm, the seventh and eighth ranks are the Xuan Pill realm, and in the end, the ninth rank corresponds to the practice of the Shenhai realm. The bear that Gu was watching was superior to the guy, so he had to be careful in dealing with him. At this time, not far from the place where Gu was, the disciple of the inner sect Hua Shiron, together with the disciples of the outer sect, hacked down the same bear. The disciples of the outer sect said that the one who dared to molest Xia Qinkyu recently went to the Killian Mountains all alone. One of the outer sect disciples accompanying Hua began to recount all the events that took place a few days ago between Gu and Xia. During his story, the student called Sister Xia by name, after which he would immediately receive a slap in the face from an angry Hua Shiron. The man was outraged that an outer sect disciple dared to call Sister Xia by name. The enraged Shiron, having learned that now Shaoyang can ask Xia anything, wanted to know where the guy is now. At this time, Gu was fighting with the bear in order to get his attributes. The guy realized that he was not able to overcome the bear and he needed to at least try to take over as many attributes of the monster as possible. During the fight with the bear, Gu used the lone killer sword technique and was able to take down the beast with one blow. Fortunately, most of the attributes of demonic beasts are external, so the guy absorbed the bubbles of the bear in order to weaken it. But he could not even think that the attribute of rage could be so strong. Gu regretted that this beast didn't have the attributes of life force and assumed that it was because of its low level. At that moment, footsteps and a voice could be heard behind the guy, who was surprised that the disciple of the outer sect, who was going to be expelled 2 days ago, was hanging on the 5th level of Kai, was now able to bring down the beast alone. Shaoyang turned around in surprise at the voice. The guy mockingly said that he was even surprised that Gu was actually able to reach the 6th level and asked Shaoyang to tell him about how he did it. In response, Gu rudely asked the man about who he was. In response, he was told that the elder brother Hua Shiron, who is among the top 30 disciples of the inner sect, is standing in front of him, and when such a person says something, it is better to answer right away. Shaoyang apologized to this and said that he did not even remember the 2nd place. What can I say from the 30th? Shiron was angry that Gu was so sarcastic and ordered his escorts to teach a lesson to Shaoyang. 2 men and 1 girl with swords began to attack Gu, but he, using the attribute of rage, rushed past the attackers with great speed. Hua Shiron's bodyguards suggested that this speed was due to the fact that the guy could be a body cultivator. Gu reflected that he had spent a lot of effort on the bears, and the 3 people attacking him were at least at the 8th level of Kai imprisonment, if not more. And although Shaoyang managed to dodge the blow, there was an inner sect disciple waiting in front of him, whose level was unknown to Gu. Gu said that he had never met Brother Hua before and did not know him, so he offered to say directly what Shiron needed from Gu. To this question, Shiron replied that although Shaoyang had no contact with Hua, Shiron wanted to help Xia Qinkyu avoid the shameful promise to become a hero. Hua suggested that the girl would be so grateful to him that she might have feelings and it would be a wonderful story. Shaoyang quickly realized that Shiron wanted Gu dead. Hua replied that Shaoyang went to the Killian mountain range alone, being at the 6th level of Kai, and in this situation it would be more logical if his bones were eaten by monsters. At that moment, Gu pointed his finger behind Hua's back and said in surprise that Sister Xia had also come to the mountains. Shiron turned his head, but saw no one there. He turned around and realized that Gu had used a distraction and managed to hide while Hua was looking the other way. Gu, who climbed a tree, shouted that Xia Qinkyu was even ready to cut off the head of Hua's dog in order to fulfill the promise made to Shaoyang. After these words, Gu disappeared. Hua ordered his men to chase him and said that Gu had gone deep into the Killian mountains. Shaoyang deftly jumped from branch to branch, running away from the inner sect disciples who were chasing him. Nu was thinking that the top 30 inner sect disciples should already be in the Jiayuan realm, and the 3 Hua bodyguards had most likely already reached the 8th Kai level. The guy realized that he did not have the slightest chance to win in a fair fight. Running past the snake, the young man realized that even if his speed attribute was absorbed, he would not be able to resist them. Gu realized that if he was given at least another month of preparation, he would be able to defeat them without any problems. Anyway, at the moment, the guy only had the opportunity to hide in the mountains from his pursuers and check whether Gu could use the power of monster beasts to defeat opponents. At this time, a beautiful girl with pink hair was walking among the trees in the mountains. Someone in black ninja-like clothes was watching her from one of the trees. Suddenly, the girl stopped and asked aloud why those with whom she came to the meeting were delayed. A man watching her from a tree launched a rocket into the air, shouting that the target had been detected and he needed reinforcements. The man was calling to the heavenly palace of heavenly warriors. After that, the spy jumped down from the tree and was about to attack the girl from behind, holding a spear in his hands. However, she turned around and asked if the person who attacked her was calling someone, hit him with 2 attacks. The attacker flew into the trunk of a tree, behind which, as it turned out, Shaoyang was hiding. The guy held his breath and assumed that he had met some kind of terrible monster. He thought to himself that the woman standing in front of him was too strong and he had not met such people before. The guy looked at the spy killed by the girl lying next to him and saw his attribute. He realized that the person was above the Jiayuan realm, which meant that the girl he met was in the condensed truth realm. Suddenly, several dozen samurai dressed like the one who attacked her gathered around the girl. The girl was surprised by the number of people sent to catch her. The girl asked the leader if they wanted to keep the palace. To this, she was told that the princess was all alone in the Kilian Mountains and this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Plus, the girl's pedigree looks very tempting. The princess replied that she had heard that the heavenly palace is full of masters and even a little heavenly warrior must have a Jiayuan sphere to enter. The girl wondered who was standing in front of her, one of the 4 great officials of the Yuan kingdom or one of the 12 gods. At this time, Gu took the attribute of the killed samurai and hid his body in the bushes. The wanderer of the god of day replied that he offered his deepest apologies to the princess and asked her to follow him to meet with Master Xinjun. A girl with a defiantly sly expression asked about what would happen if she refused to go with them. She was told that in this case, they would have to lead the princess by force and several samurai went towards the girl. The girl cursed and told Xinjun to come to her himself. The god of the day replied that such an important matter had been reported to the heavenly officials and it was expected that Master Xinjun was aware of where the princess was. Shaoyang, who was still hiding behind the tree, absorbed the attribute energy in large quantities. At the same time, on the other side, the 3 accompanying Hua were looking for Shaoyang and wondered how he could escape so quickly, because the guy was only at the 6th level of Kai. The girl said out loud that she was afraid to be in the mountains, because they could meet more powerful monsters and she was not sure she could defeat them. In response, another escort called her a coward and reminded her that Brother Hua was already in the middle of the Jiayuan sphere, and they had nothing to fear. Suddenly, a noise was heard nearby in the forest and the birds abruptly flew into the sky. The disciples of the sect paid attention to this and decided that the guy had met a monster, so they ran in that direction. When they arrived there, they saw Shaoyang hiding behind a tree and were already preparing to attack him. Hua shouted Gu Shaoyang, die, jumped out of the bushes at the guy, holding a sword in his hands. Shaoyang recoiled and rejoiced that everything was going according to his plan, decided that the matter remained small. The guy ran out to the princess and the ninjas surrounding her in large numbers. Gu shouted that there was a murderer, pointing his finger at Hua and his escorts. Shaoyang said they killed the samurai and hid him in the bushes. The god of the day asked Hua and his bodyguards about who they were. Excited, Gu shouted to the people to answer as soon as possible. Hua realized that the people standing in front of him were masters and he shouldn't talk too much. Hua Shuron introduced himself by name and said that he was a disciple of the nearby Qingyun sect. The guy mentioned that he and his entourage had an order to capture an external disciple of Gu Shaoyang, who had also been expelled from the sect earlier. To this, Gu indignantly shouted that it was all a lie and he didn't even know Shuron. The god of the day said the guys were making too much noise and ordered everyone to be killed. Gu fussed and asked with fear in his voice not to kill them, because it was too cruel, but it was too early for the samurai and they started attacking the students. Hua and his entourage swore obscenely at the fact that they were being pressed because of Gu and decided that they needed to get out of the forest as soon as possible. Shaoyang noticed that all the warriors who attacked him were practitioners of the Jiayuan sphere, and he should not fight them without a plan. He He looked at the princess and realized that, apparently, she was not for one with the attackers. In other words, behind her back, Gu would be the safest. Shaoyang ran towards the girl, and she looked at him with an angry look. Well, he noticed that the princess had a murderous aura and he felt uneasy. Gu was surprised to notice that the girl he met in Lechu and behind whose back he was trying to hide had the attribute of a murderous aura. Shaoyang remembered that the sword aura that he took from Xia Qinkyu helped him a lot that time, so he must get the princess attribute in order to survive. The guy attacked the girl of the lone assassin's sword technicians and ran up to her attribute. Gu had almost taken the bubble when suddenly the girl pushed him away from her. However, for Gu's luck, he still managed to pick up the attribute at the last moment. Shaoyang was filled with the power of the attribute. The princess noticed that Gu had mastered the killing aura and couldn't figure out how he got her ability. The samurai noticed that Shaoyang had the same aura as the princess, which could mean that he was related to blood, so they couldn't let him go. The girl heard these words and decided that Gu was her relative. The samurai started attacking the princess, but she brushed them off with a single movement of her hand. The god of the day started attacking the princess and said that he had heard that 3 years ago the princess had reached the peak of the condensed truth realm. So now, after defeating the princess, he would be able to feel the full power of her blood. The girl attacked the god of the day in response and said that he would never be able to defeat her because it was not in his power. Hua, who overheard their conversation, decided that the princess was probably a reincarnation of blood. The girl accompanying him asked Chiron about what he meant. Hua replied that the people who made this rebirth have a special talent that all immortal cultivators dream of. The ability of such people to cultivate is also different, and the speed is several times higher than that of ordinary people. If such people manage to survive, they will surpass the Shenhai sphere in strength, and survival in this case is the main condition. According to legend, Blood is an ancient evil creature. She recognized only one person as her partner for life and remained faithful to him until the end. The person capable of reincarnating her must be a genius. That was until the Holy Land discovered an effect called elixir. Several great masters found out about it when they added blood to their pills. The effect that came out could help them surpass the Shenhai sphere. Since then, blood reincarnations were no longer considered geniuses. Each reborn was sent to the Holy Land, where they were raised as an elixir. Since they are constantly reincarnating, they were considered a constant source. But the materials for the elixir, that is, the children, found out about their fate and ran away. Every rebirth is reflected in the sky by a murderous star, so when the blood entered the mortal world, the Holy Land went hunting and in the end the entire dynasty was destroyed. Hua shouted to Gu Shaoyang that if he was really related to blood, then the sect, upon learning about it, would definitely expel him. The guy was surprised when he realized that the girl whose aura he took was a blood reincarnator. Thus, when Gu absorbed her murderous aura, the samurai mistook Shaoyang for one of the dynasty. Shaoyang was glad that the princess gave him a break by fighting with the god of the day. The god of the day was flying from the next attack of the princess and had to fall to the ground, but someone's hand deftly caught him. It turned out to be the Lord of Heaven. All the samurai and the god of the day himself knelt before him and were very glad that the Lord had finally arrived. The man said that the blood had not appeared for 3 years and apparently the team of the god of the day had done a good job in order to find it, so upon returning to the heavenly palace, he would be rewarded. Pleiadica said that he would deal with the princess himself and was about to talk about the students, when suddenly Hua interrupted him. He introduced himself and his entourage and said that he was ready to gladly assist in the capture of blood. Pleiadica said that he was familiar with the 4 great clans and was surprised to meet their disciples. Hua, pointing his finger at Gu, said that he had done a lot of bad things in the sect and Chiron was chasing him by order. But in the process he accidentally interfered with the samurai and the god of the day. Gu realized that now there was one more strong monster and he needed to run while there was still such an opportunity, because then it would be too late. The Lord ordered the samurai and the god of day to catch Gu when they rushed in pursuit of him. However, the princess attacked the god of the day, justifying it by saying that they had not finished yet. But the Lord stopped Princess King Luan, saying that he was now her opponent. The Lord summarized that the devil from the Yuan kingdom protects a child who has reached the Kai prison area, and asked King if Gu has a chance to escape from the samurai of the heavenly palace. The god of the day stands alone in the middle of the forest and examines the area around, looking for Gu. At this moment, the guy hides behind one of the trees and reflects that he definitely did not think that even after absorbing the monster's agility attribute, he would not be able to break away from the god of the day. Shaoyang looks again at the place where his pursuer stood earlier, but he is not there. The guy decides that the god of the day has left, and with the words "it seems safe" comes out of his hiding place. At this moment, the god of day, who is actually hiding in that very tree, jumps on Shaoyang from above, intending to kill him. Gu smiles as if that's all he needed and deftly dodges the attack to the side. The god of the day notices that he found himself in a small pit with eggs that he himself had just broken. Gu quipped about the preparedness of the gods, in particular the god of the day, and asked if he hunts him or steals eggs. The opponent replied that he thought that Gu had prepared a trap against him, but before he could finish, a huge snake jumped out from the side and pressed the god of day to the trunk of a tree, wrapping its long body around him. Shaoyang said that the monster in front of him is a python that has reached the 4th rank, and now its strength is at the level of the Jiayuan region. He also added that this beast always appears when someone wants to covet his nest. Gu joked that the god of day was frivolous when he broke the eggs of this monster and advised him to get ready to feel the full fury of a demonic beast of the 4th rank. The snake opened its mouth and was about to attack the god of day, when suddenly he stopped it with just a movement of his hand. The god of day said that such a pitiful monster of only the 4th level is not capable of defeating him. Shaoyang stood on the snake's head and said that it would not be the beast that would fight him, but he. At that moment, the guy took the attributes dexterity, bloodlust, and strength from the monster and swung his sword with the words "murderers are always waiting for payback." The attack cut the beast and hit the god of the day, but not critically. The opponent said that Gu made a fatal mistake when he decided to use Python in order to get rid of him, because Shaoyang did not take into account that in order to become one of the 12 gods of the wanderers of the Yuanya kingdom in the heavenly palace, one must reach the sphere of condensed truth. In response, Gu called the words of the god of the day nonsense and said that his opponent most likely noticed that he was slowing down and was now just stalling until the arrival of the other samurai. The god of day replied that a pitiful boy like Gu with the level of only the Kai confinement area could not defeat him. After these words, the opponent fell to the ground exhausted. Shaoyang said that his sword was soaked in the poison of the king cobra and he kept it for Hua Shiran. But if not for the sword, Gu would not have been able to defeat the god of day. Shaoyang concluded to himself that unfortunately, after moving to the level of the sphere of condensed truth, Kai cultivation becomes more internal, which means there are no bubbles with life force around the god of the day. Shaoyang decided to take the mask of the god wanderer of the heavenly palace, as it could possibly be useful to him in the future. Suddenly, Hua Shiran and his 3 escorts ran out of the forest. They noticed the slain god of the day and were a little scared of Gu. However, Hua said that even he at the level of the Jiayuan region would not see the power of the god of day, and such a worthless disciple like Gu would not be able to kill him. Hua decided that the god of the day was most likely fighting with a python, and Shaoyang viciously attacked from behind. Gu said that this version sounds interesting, but it was he who set the demonic beast on the god of the day. Hua ordered his escorts to catch Shaoyang and deliver him to the Lord of Heaven, and the 3 disciples, following his order, immediately ran towards Gu in order to attack him. A murderous aura appeared around Shaoyang. The guy was not at all afraid of the fact that 2 students of at least the 8th level of Kai imprisonment were running straight at him. Gu lifted them into the air in one motion, and then dropped them to the ground. Hua, who saw this, shouted that it was impossible, that there was no owner of the 6th level of Kai in front of him. Otherwise, how could he overturn such strong opponents 2 ranks higher than him with one wave of his hand? Shaoyang replied that he still could not understand why they were trying to kill him. Gu guesses that Hua wants to please Sister Xia, and it turns out that Shiran can kill someone he sees for the first time without looking, even if he does not hold a grudge against him. Hua replied that since the guy wants to know the reasons so much, he should take into account his weakness and the fact that killing him is the easiest option. After these words, Shiran ran towards Gu with a sword to attack. Shaoyang noticed that Shiran is in the middle of the Yuan sphere, which means that Gu will not be able to defeat him head-on. Because Hua has much more energy, which means Shaoyang will have to finish quickly. Gu should grab a chance to piss him off and hit him with all his might. After thinking it over, Gu shouted defiantly to Hua that if he wanted to kill him, then let him try. Hua abruptly rushed to Gu, but he ran away very quickly. Shiran did not understand how this was possible, because such a speed is at least the level of technology of the earth. Shaoyang, who was sitting on a tree, asked Hua about whether a disciple entering the top 30 could not keep up with an outer sect disciple going for promotion. In fact, the Python attributes that Shaoyang absorbed accelerated him even more. The angry Hua shouted that the guy would still beg his forgiveness on his knees and ran at him with a sword. At that moment, Gu ran down from the tree,